हरे कृष्णा। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। So welcome back. Finally, we are down to the last session of this course. So, I want to start by expressing my gratitude to all of you for sticking on to such a long course. I know it's very unusual for an online course to go so long, but I am also learning. This is my first experience, so kindly bear with me. I mean, you have already tolerated me. So, it was a very, very wonderful experience doing this course. So today, on the last part of this course, last portion of this course, we will do the question and answer session. And I have about 25 odd questions, and some questions would require an elaborate explanation, and some questions I can quickly go over. But so what I am thinking is, whatever time it takes, we will try to complete the question and answer session in this one class. So even if it may take at the most 2 hours, which I hope it should not take that long, but we will try to complete the Q&A session uh, in this session only. Okay, so we will start, and I again wanted to mention that from the next course onwards, we will have a more regular Q&A session, because because this being my first course, it was not clear how I should do the Q&A. Generally, for the courses that I conduct, Q&A is during the course only. While I am talking, anyone can raise their hands and ask a question. So that's not a problem. I am always comfortable with that, because as and when the doubt comes, it should be clarified. That is the way I am comfortable. It's not that my line of thought gets disturbed when people ask questions. So I am quite comfortable with getting the questions answered as and when it comes. But in an online course, I was not sure how to do. So therefore, we are having one Q&A session at the end of the course. But hopefully, we will have more regular Q&A sessions as and when the course progresses. In the subsequent courses, maybe after every 4 sessions, we will have a Q&A session or something like that. So therefore, the problem was, after the first few sessions, people understood that this fellow is not going to answer any questions, so they actually stopped asking questions. That was my mistake. So practically, most of the questions that have come up are all questions from the earlier section of the course only. So I apologize for that. I am also learning. So in subsequent courses, we will try to rectify this mistake. Okay, so we will start the session. First question. So the first 2 questions we will elaborately discuss. Then subsequent questions don't require that much of an elaboration. So the first question is, if bhakti is able to destroy prarabdha karma, why do we see devotees still suffering because of diseases or accidents or things like that? Of course, those of you who would have watched the other course, self-evaluation tools on the path of bhakti, we had a very elaborate discussion on this theme, but I will not assume that all of you have also watched the other course. So for those of you who may not have had the opportunity to watch the other online course that I offered, I will go over this section. If not so elaborately, at least with fair bit we will complete this section. So I will just discuss the purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to this one verse that comes in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Very famous verse, Prabhupada quotes this many times. So we will just discuss the commentary of this course of this verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where he elaborately explains this theme. Yasyaham manugranami harishye taddanam shanaihi tato adanam tyajantyasya swajana dukka dukkitam. So here Krishna says, Yasya aham anugranami. If I especially favor someone, harishye taddanam shanaihi. I gradually take his wealth away. Tato adanam tyajanti asya. Swajana. And his swajana, his relatives and friends, will gradually abandon him. Why? Because he has no money. What is the use of a penniless person? No utility. So therefore they will reject him. Dukka dukkitam. So therefore he will suffer one distress after another distress after another distress. When first wealth abandons him, then all the relatives and friends one by one, when they start abandoning him, he becomes very distressed. So finally only Krishna is left. So he understands, oh, I was under illusion. Actually the real shelter is only Krishna, like that he realizes. So Krishna especially favors devotees in this way. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, a man suffers misery because of loss of wealth. He suffers further because of rejection by his relatives, because he has lost his money. This suffering being given by the Lord is not the result of karma. So therefore, Krishna can give suffering to his devotees. Even the happiness given to the Lord's devotees is not the result of karma, but it is an unrequested result of bhakti. As we saw in the earlier section, Kleshagni Shubhada. Shubhada means practice of bhakti bestows auspiciousness, and one aspect of auspiciousness is Sukha Pradatvam. Practice of bhakti bestows happiness also. So therefore, for a devotee, neither his happiness nor his distress is a product of his prarabdha karma. The happiness and distress which appear to be prarabdha karma are actually given by the Supreme Lord himself. The Shruti says, Bhavad Utta Shubha Ashubhayoho. Bhavad Utta means given by you. Shubha Ashubha means auspicious and inauspicious reactions. So Krishna himself can provide auspicious and inauspicious reactions for the devotees, and he does provide. Now the question that may arise is, the Lord is affectionate towards his devotee. So how can the affectionate Lord make his devotee suffer? This is the natural question that anyone may get. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, sometimes the father who may be affectionate to his son, the son may always want to spend time with his smartphone, neglecting his studies. So what will the father do? Will he give his own smartphone also? While you are charging your smartphone, make sure that I want to ensure that you don't miss even a single moment, so take my smartphone. So while your smartphone is getting charged, use mine, and while mine is getting charged, use yours. Is this what the father will say? No. The father will take away the smartphone and give him the books, even though the child may not like to read. But the father knows that the father's affection manifests in the form of an apparent distress to the child. Even though the child may not like, but the father is definitely doing it out of affection for the child. The innocent child may not understand it. Similarly, the innocent living entity, innocent devotee, may not really understand how how is Krishna showing me mercy by putting me through such a difficult situation? But then one may say, look, the suffering of a devotee and the suffering of a non-devotee looks the same. You are telling that the suffering of the non-devotee is due to his karma, the suffering of the devotee is due to Krishna. Is there any difference between the two? Srila Vishnu Jagadhakur says, there are three differences between distress or happiness that is experienced due to one's karma and experience due to Krishna, being given by Krishna. He says that as Bhagavatam says, Bhogena punyam kushalena papam. One can dissolve one's pious karma by enjoying, and one can dissolve one's impious karma by suffering the result. But even though one may experience happiness or distress and dissolve one's pious and impious karma, but after dissolving the karma, the desire for performing those activities does not go away. This is the first symptom of suffering or happiness due to karma. The desire for that sinful activity does not go away. And the seed continues and it gives more and more suffering. Okay. And sometimes the sinful reaction may be so severe that the law of karma will have to send that person to hell. There are various kinds of hells where the living entity may be roasted and toasted and boiled in, fried in hot oil and made to run over, nails, thrown in a river which is made of pus, stool, urine and blood and everything, made, bitten by dogs, and his intestines are pulled out by dogs and things like that. So the law of karma can instill excruciating pain, hellish pain on the people according to whatever act they have committed. Therefore, there are three qualities that we have seen are the symptoms of suffering due to one's karmic reaction for the non-devotees. First is, even though one may experience happiness and distress and dissolve the karma, but the desire to perform that sinful activity is not gone. Second, and this desire leads to more and more actions and more reactions, happiness, suffering like that. And the third is, the distress many times can lead one to experience hellish suffering. These are the three symptoms of suffering due to one's prarabdha karma. On the other hand, there are three symptoms which are contrary to this, which are experienced by devotees as given by Krishna. So what are the symptoms of suffering given by Krishna? First is, that suffering is given that suffering is experienced by the jiva not because of his own desire, but that suffering is given by Krishna because of his desire. The suffering of the devotee is due to Krishna's desire, not due to the jiva's desire. Krishna himself personally gives. Why? To pull the devotee closer to his lotus feet. So therefore, that suffering exists only for the duration for which the person understands that I need to take shelter of Krishna. Once the person realizes it, immediately Krishna removes that suffering. He does not allow that suffering to prolong according to his karma. He says, okay, look, I think this devotee is losing focus. I need to bring him back to focus. So he may give some suffering. And suddenly the person realizes, oh, I got carried away, I got distracted. The moment the devotee realizes it, Krishna removes that suffering away. He does not allow that suffering to prolong beyond the purpose. And the third, Yamaraj mentions to Yamadutas. This is in the episode of Ajamil. Yamaraj tells Yamadutas, Jahvana bhakti bhagavad gunana madeyam chetaschana smarati taccharanara vindam krishnaya no namati yat shira ekadapi tanana yadvamasato akrita vishnu krityan. So they say, now we will tell you, O Yamadutas, whom you should bring to hell. Whom should you bring to hell? Jihvana tan asato anayadvam. Bring only the non-devotees. Akrita Vishnu Krityam, who have never served Vishnu. Yad shiraha ekada api no namanti Krishnaya. Whose head has not even once bowed down to Krishna. Jihvana Bhakti Bhagavad Gunanamadeyam, and whose tongues have never glorified the qualities of the Supreme Lord. Cheta Nasmarati Taccharanaravinam, and one whose consciousness has never meditated on the lotus feet of Krishna. Only bring those people. Don't bring the devotees. Which means, even though Krishna may give suffering to the devotees to accomplish particular purposes, he does not allow that suffering to become as severe as hellish suffering. Little bit of suffering he gives, he may give, but it will not be hellish suffering. Because of the affection of the Lord for his devotee, the Lord does not give them extreme suffering. So therefore, these are the three symptoms. While the suffering of the non-devotee is due to his own desire, the suffering of the jiva is due to the desire of Krishna to bring that soul closer to his lotus feet. And that suffering, Krishna does not prolong it too much. Only to the extent that jiva understands his mistake, only till then he will allow that jiva to suffer, and then immediately let it stop. And even that suffering does not extend to the level of hellish suffering. So in this way, the suffering experienced by the devotees as given by Krishna, it has these three symptoms. And in this way, it is different from the suffering of the non-devotees due to their own karma. Now, so therefore he says, the suffering arising from karma and the Lord are like the suffering arising from receiving a beating from an enemy and one's mother. The beating of one's mother is also for protection. And even the glorification of an enemy is for backstabbing. So therefore, Krishna giving suffering is like the slap of a mother in order to give shelter. But karma has no such goals. One is like poison and the other is like nectar, like that. Now, the natural question that arises is, can't the Supreme Lord fulfill this purpose of bringing the devotee closer to his lotus feet without giving suffering? Why should he give suffering? Can't he allow this to happen without giving suffering? No living entity need to suffer. Everyone has learned his lesson without undergoing suffering. Can't the Supreme Lord not do it? Can't he fulfill his purpose? Srila Vishnu Thakur says, no, that purpose will not be fulfilled. Because Krishna gives suffering to a devotee, and by giving that suffering to the devotee, apart from bringing the devotee closer to his lotus feet, he also accomplishes other purposes. Three other purposes, Vishnu Thakur says. What are the three purposes? First is, in order to preserve the secret of bhakti. One should not think that, oh, I can do any kind of sinful activity. All I need to do is to do Krishna, 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 and I will not suffer. People should not think like that, because that is not the mood of devotees. They may succumb to some sinful temptations, but their inherent nature is not to commit that sinful activity. But if common man sees that this devotee was such a sinful person, but just because of chanting he is not suffering at all. When a common man sees that, he will take up to bhakti for all wrong reasons. Therefore, in order to preserve the secret of bhakti, Krishna allows the devotee to suffer. The second reason, to avoid uprooting the opinions of speculators and smartas. The speculators and the smartas who are very much attached to performing pious activities, they think that by performing pious activities is the only way to enjoy, and performing impious activities is a sure shot recipe to suffer. So because they do not have the faith in pure devotional service, but they have some kind of Vedic faith which is proper. So such Vedic faith should not be destroyed. They should not see devotees who may have some sinful inclinations always enjoying. Then they will think, oh, this is all bogus, this law of karma is all bogus. I will also do sinful activities and I will also enjoy. Like that they will think. So therefore, people who may not have the highest faith in pure devotional service should not also give up a lower Vedic faith. In order to protect their lower Vedic faith, also sometimes Krishna allows the devotees to at least seemingly undergo some suffering. And the third reason is to increase the longing of his devotees. As Mother Kunti prays, Vipada santutas sashvat tatra tatra jagat guru bhavato adarshanam yat syad apunar bhavadarshanam. She says, Krishna, give me more and more suffering, because whenever suffering is there, I helplessly call out for you and you are there. So in this way, to increase the longing of the devotees, Krishna sometimes gives them suffering. So in this way, Krishna accomplishes many purposes through one act. And in this case, through giving some seeming suffering to his devotee, he is actually trying to accomplish many things. Moreover, Srila Vishnu Jagadhakur says, if I make the devotees always happy, then there would be no avatars such as Krishna and Rama who can come to protect the devotees and destroy the demons. Because Krishna has told, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So therefore, then if the devotees are not suffering and there are no demons, then there is no reason for the avatars to come. And if the avatars don't come, then how can the devotees participate in the pastimes of the avatars? But then again, the question may be, but the avatars can come and perform pastimes even without the devotees suffering. The Krishna, is there a reason? Should Krishna come only for paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam? When the devotees are happy and when there are no demons, is it a rule that no avatars should come? Is it like that? So can't he come without the devotee suffering at all? A valid question. So Srila Vishnu Jagadhakur says in a very poetic way, my dear brother, I feel pity on you. You don't understand rasa? Just listen. The sunrise appears splendid because of darkness. In the summer, coolness is pleasant. In the winter, warmth is pleasant. In the darkness, a lamp appears splendid rather than in light. In broad daylight, if you light a lamp, people can't even notice it. But in the deep dark night, A lamp is a very welcome, it has a very welcome presence. Everyone can see due to that lamp. Food tastes delicious when there is suffering from hunger. The more hungry we feel, the more we can relish the food. The Acharya says, there is no need to elaborate more. If you can't understand this, then you can't understand this subject matter, he says. This is very common sense. When there is suffering, the appreciation of the rescuer is more. So especially during COVID crisis, when someone is stranded at the border and there is no scope of eating, at that time when someone distributes food, there is so much appreciation. The very same food, when someone is appreciating, when you are well-to-do and you are not stranded, everything is going on fine, you will not even notice, or you will think, maybe he is distributing some rotten food or something like that, we may feel. So therefore, for these reasons, to summarize what we have seen, the question is, if a devotee does not have prarabdha karma, then why do we see devotees suffering? That was the question. And in this context, we discussed the explanation of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on this verse, Yasyaham anugrinami harishet yaddanam shanaihi. So Krishna especially makes that devotee to suffer due to loss of wealth, loss of support from the relatives and friends. But then we saw that how can the affectionate Lord make the devotee to suffer? So he says this is just like a father taking away the source of enjoyment from his son so that he can study. So, and then we saw, but if the devotee also suffers, if the karmi also suffers, what is the difference? We saw three differences between suffering that comes due to karma and suffering that comes due to, that is given by devotee, the Supreme Lord himself, that we saw. And then the next theme that we saw was, can't the Lord fulfill his purpose without giving suffering to the devotees? No. Because by the Lord giving suffering to his devotees, three other purposes are also accomplished, which is to preserve the secret of bhakti, to avoid uprooting of the opinions of the smartas, and to increase the longing to the devotees. But is it a fault? And also we saw that Krishna has promised paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam. So if the devotees are not suffering, then how would the avatars appear? Someone may say, oh, this is a very strange reasoning. Can't the avatars appear without the devotee suffering? We saw, you should understand rasa. Just as appreciation for food is very prominent when one is hungry, in the same way, when there is suffering, appreciation of Krishna's sweet presence is very much appreciable. So for the purpose of rasa, also he puts the devotee into some kind of suffering. In order to give him more, just like if you eat amla, gooseberry, it tastes little sort of bitterish taste. But as soon as you drink little water, it tastes just like sugar, very, very sweet. So that bitterness enhances. Otherwise, if you just drink water, water has no taste. But then water tastes sweet when you drink that water after eating little amla. You take a bite of amla, chew it for a few seconds, drink some water. It is like you are drinking sugar water, like that. Okay, so hope this answers the question. The second question is somewhat connected, so I took it. Regarding karma kanda, atonement like sarpadosha, kala sarpadosha and various kinds of Karmakandi atonements. It is also said by many Vaishnavas in ISKCON to do the needful when required. Just do the needful, Prabhu. Or for a persisting long problem, immediate remedy should be taken. So if we have a very persistent long problem, there should be some remedy taken. For example, the example that they give is that if there is a specific medical problem, then you do go to the specialist to get it treated. So if I have some medical problem, I go to a doctor. I don't say, I will just chant and the medical problem will go away. In the same way, if I have some problem due to my past karma, what is wrong in going to an astrologer? Even ISKCON encourages astrology and its solution. I don't know, ISKCON means ISKCON members. So ISKCON encourages means, I don't know whether it's a GBC resolution that everyone should refer to astrology or anything like that. So what is, I don't understand what it means by ISKCON encourages astrology. That's a very vague statement. So ISKCON is made of members, and I don't ever remember seeing a GBC rule that make sure you get your astrological chart done before you take up to devotional service or anything like that. So we will try to understand the answer for this question. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he mentions that every activity, the success of every activity depends on 5 factors. He says, Adhishtanam tata karta karanam cha pratak vida vividas cha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. This is 18th chapter 14th verse of Bhagavad Gita. He says, what are the 5 factors? He says, Adhishtanam. Adhishtanam means the body or the place where we perform. So if I have to be a 100 meters champion, my current body is not fit. Even though while I was in school, I was much more thinner and I was actually a 100 meters runner. But now currently my body does not support. So Adhishtanam, so if my goal is to become a 100 meter sprint champion, then you must have a gross body which is appropriately endowed. Then the second is Karta. Karta means doer, or in one sense you can say the Upadhi, the kind of identification. I have to identify myself as a 100 meter runner. Oh, I am an athlete. When that I am an athlete bhav is very strong, then there is a good that adds to our endeavor. Then I will endeavor in that direction. Then I will daily go for jogging and I will keep my body fit. So all my endeavors are connected to my karta bhav. What is my identification? But if I don't identify as an athlete, if I just identify as a very studious student, for me studies is all that matters. I am a studious man. I am a studious student. If that is my identification, then I will not spend any time doing jogging or keeping my body fit. So this is the second cause of success of an activity. Adhishtanam tata karta, the body, the identification. Karanam, the senses. The gross body may be endowed, but the subtle body also has to be properly endowed. I must have proper senses which can support that thing. And Adhishtanam also means place. Just like if India plays Pakistan in India, it has an edge. But if India plays Pakistan in Pakistan, Pakistan has the home advantage. So the place also contributes to the success of an activity. So the place, Adhishtanam, the identification, karta bhav. Third is the senses must be properly endowed. Fourth is cheshta. Vividascha pratak cheshta means endeavor. I must ultimately run the 100 meters race. If I don't run that race, then just thinking that I am a 100 meter sprint champion, I will not become a 100 meter sprint champion. There must be some endeavor on the part of the jiva. Fourth thing. And fifth is Daivam. Daivam means the super soul, or the super soul's role is to give Upadrashta Anumanta, allow the reactions according to one's karma. So therefore, super soul here also refers to karma actually. Because the role of super soul is to bestow the karma to the jiva according to whatever he deserves. So 5 factors. Adhishtanam tata karta karanam cha pratagvida vividascha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. Of the 5, let us for the time being forget the first 3 causes. Let us zoom it down to only 2 causes. Endeavor and karma. So these 2 are very important factors. So in many activities, our is it like for any activity the result will be proportional to my endeavor? Like say for example, if someone tells me, Prabhu, can you please pull this 25 kilogram sack of rice? I can pull. And the more I endeavor, the more effectively I will be able to pull that sack of rice. So in that case, my endeavor, the success is proportional to my endeavor. But if someone says, Prabhu, can you please push this wall? Will the success of pushing that wall be proportional to my endeavor? No. I will become more and more tired by pushing the wall because literally I cannot push the wall. So therefore, these are things which are destined by karma. So when something is severely destined by karma, how much ever we may endeavor, the success of that activity may not be proportional to that endeavor. But there are some activities which are not so severely destined by karma. Okay. So now let us try to evaluate, going to a doctor and going to an astrologer, is it the same? When we are going to an astrologer, we are trying to tweak the karma part. We are trying to see, can I do something to change my karma? Can I do some prayaschitta to change my karma? This is what we are trying to do. But when we go to a doctor does not change the karma. When we go to a doctor, we are trying to work within the realm of our endeavor, cheshta. I will give you an example. First, I must thank the person who asked this question because of using the appropriate example. Because this is a very wonderful example. He has used the example of a doctor. If you go to traditional Ayurvedic Vaidyas, who have been from generation after generation, who have been treating patients' illness, if you see, apart from Ayurveda, they have to know astrology. Why? You go to them and they will check your nadi, they will check your bodily symptoms and they will prescribe some medicine. If that medicine does not work, then they will again see, oh, was my diagnosis all right? They will again check. And if the diagnosis, if they feel that it is all right, then they will give, okay, maybe this course of medicine will not work. They will check plan B and then plan C. If plan A, B, C fails, then they will take the chart, astrological chart of that person. They will see, oh, this illness is completely determined by karma. So what do they say? Sorry, we cannot do anything. The doctor's endeavor to cure that patient comes within the realm of cheshta. So he says, my treatment will not help you. because this is karmically designed, this illness is karmically destined illness. So therefore, going to a doctor falls within the realm of cheshta or one's own endeavor. So therefore, when a devotee goes to a doctor, he is trying to see, so of these 5 causes, we discussed 2 causes for non-devotees, which is endeavor cheshta and daiva karma. But for the devotee, as we saw in the previous verse, a devotee's suffering is not due to karma. It is personally given by the Lord's mercy, anugraha. So in this case, for the devotees there is anugraha and cheshta. So when a devotee is suffering a physical ailment, when he goes to a doctor, he is trying to check, is it within my endeavor to cure this? But if a devotee goes to an astrologer, then the basic understanding is, my suffering is due to my karma and it is not given by Krishna. Because an astrological chart can at the most read one's karma only. It cannot, the astrological chart cannot read Krishna's anugraha. The chart cannot predict that, nor can the astrologer see that. Because Bhishma Dev says, Nahi asya karhichid rajan puman veda viditsitam yad vijigyasaya yukta muyyanti kavayopihi. My dear Yudhishthir Maharaj, no one can understand the plan of the Lord, including the greatest devotees. So this astrologer, how can he understand the plan of the Lord? If the devotee's life is controlled by Krishna, and if no one can understand the plan of Krishna, how can an astrologer seeing the astrological chart understand the plan of Krishna? But still, if a devotee is adamant and he goes to an astrologer to fix his problems, then what happens? We have to understand Krishna's psychology. Will that, and the astrologer may say, oh, you have this problem, you have to worship this demigod, this demigod, this demigod. Then we may say, oh, just like I go to a doctor, I have come to an astrologer. So when he starts worshipping the demigod, then what will happen? Krishna says, yo yo yam yam tanum bhaktam shraddhayarchitum ichchati tasya tasya achalam shraddham tameva vidadamyaham. Krishna says, whenever I see an inclination in a person to worship a demigod, Krishna says, I make that inclination into firm faith. So here is a devotee who has gone to an astrologer innocently because he is suffering, and rather he has started worshipping the demigod, and Krishna will make that faith of that person very strong. Sataya shraddhaya yuktas tasyaradhana mihate labate cha tatak kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan. Krishna says in the next verse, endowed with that faith which I have given him, when he worships me, when he worships the demigod, through that demigod I will fulfill all his desires. So which means, when a devotee goes to an astrologer and he suggests some prayaschitta, and if the devotee does it, it will work for him. His bodily ailment will go away. But then Krishna will see, oh, this devotee does not want me to control his life. This devotee does not have trust in my benevolence. He wants to be controlled by karma. I will allow him to be controlled by his karma. So Krishna will withdraw. So we will overcome our physical ailment, but what will happen to our faith in Krishna? So therefore, we have to be careful. But still, for purposes like marriage, matchmaking, for such purposes, astrological chart is good, because apart from predicting the karma of the devotee, which it cannot actually, it can predict one's swabhava also. While as soon as one takes up to bhakti, the karma is gone, but the inherent nature that he has developed over many, many lifetimes, that swabhava, it gradually goes away. As we saw in the other course, it go Ekadesha Vartini, Bahudesha Vartini, Prayiki, Purna, Atyantiki. In 5 stages, gradually it goes away. So if 2 people are getting married, while both of them may be practicing bhakti and their swabhava will also become rectified more and more, but it may take a long time. In the meantime, if they have completely contradictory swabhava, then they will have to spend so much time just trying to cope with each other, and it will take valuable time away from devotional service. So for such purposes, like marriage matchmaking, one can always refer to the astrological chart. But for other purposes, devotees should be convinced that I will try my cheshta, if it is within Krishna's mercy to cure the disease through some medical treatment, let it be cured. Otherwise, I will accept it as Krishna's mercy. That should be a devotee's conviction. That is why Rupa Goswami says, as we read in the previous course, Ananushthanato dosho bhakti anganam prajayate na karmanam akaranad esha bhakti adhikarinam nishiddha acharato daivat prayaschittam tu na uchitam iti Vaishnava shastranam rahasyam tadvidam matam. Rupa Goswami says, Ananushthanato dosho bhakti anganam prajayate. A devotee is at fault for not performing his essential limbs of devotional service. Na karmanam akaranad esha bhakti adhikarinad. He is not at fault for not performing the varnashram prescribed duties. Nishiddha acharato daivat. By chance, if he commits some nishiddha karma, some sinful activity, prayaschittam tu na uchitam. He should not resort to any kind of karmakandya prayaschitta as referred by the astrologers. Iti Vaishnava shastranam rahasyam tadvidam matam. This is the opinion of those who have understood the secret of Vaishnava shastras. So therefore, coming back to the question, to say that ISKCON recommends astrology is a very vague thing. Like for example, Rupa Goswami does not belong to ISKCON, or Krishna does not belong to ISKCON. He himself says, one should not. It is clearly mentioned here that the suffering of a devotee, if the suffering of a devotee is not due to his karma, then what are we going to accomplish? And if the astrological chart can only predict karma, then what are we going to accomplish by looking at the astrological chart for a devotee? So therefore, one should be, suffering is a very powerful opportunity for us to take shelter of Krishna. So if we don't, just like when a father takes a son to teach him swimming, at some point he has to remove the float, the tire or whatever. He has to pull that float away so that he will learn some swimming. But if one keeps on being attached to the float, then he will never learn swimming. So Krishna gives suffering to the devotee so that the devotee can learn to swim across the ocean of samsara. Bhavambudir vatsapadam param padam 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 yad vipadam na tesham. Therefore, intelligent devotee pray for suffering so that they can grow. But a person who does not understand this will immediately try to look for the float rather than trying to see, okay, whatever I have learnt, is it helping me in swimming? Let me try to see if, the father is there, he is right there close by. When you are trying to drown, immediately he will come and save. So rather than taking shelter of the father and trying to learn swimming, if we keep on looking for alternate shelters, then Krishna will withdraw his shelter. And he will say, okay, you want to depend on karma, I will allow you to depend on your karma. So the choice is ours. Okay, so that is a brief discussion about and also Krishna says, Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. So for my Ananya Bhaktas, Krishna says, I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. The happiness of my Ananya Bhaktas is given by me. It is not obtained by pious acts. So if for such persons, I take care of their attainment of wealth and their maintenance, even though they do not expect such things. Krishna is personally willing to maintain us. The use of the word Vahami indicates that the Lord bears the burden of maintaining their bodies. The bodies of devotees is not maintained by karma. It is maintained by Krishna. In the manner that the householder takes the responsibility for maintaining his own wife and children. Just like the householder feels, will he say that, oh, this month I will not work, let the neighbor give some of his earnings to us and we will, and you all can be taken care. No, he feels personally responsible to earn that money to protect the family members. Similarly, Krishna feels that personal obligation to protect his devotees. It's a loving obligation, the burden of love. So, because my Ananya devotee has no karma due to lack of desire, his happiness is given by me. So, one should not say that, oh, this devotee does not have love for Krishna, because instead of serving Krishna, he is giving the burden of his maintenance to Krishna. But Krishna says, no, 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 please don't accuse my devotee. He did not give that burden to me. I want to take. Please give me an opportunity. So, he says that rather I by my own will accept it. He says that when a husband carries his wife out of affection and love, that is burden. But he does not feel that burden because of that affection and love. Remove that wife and same weight of, rice goni or a gunny bag of rice you put, immediately he will feel greatly burdened. How is it that? Same weight. When it is wife, he can lift. When it is a sack of rice, maybe half the weight, he will feel greatly burdened. So, Krishna says, I don't feel any burden. I want to. This gives me pleasure. Please allow me to maintain my devotees. Therefore, when it comes to maintaining devotees, protecting devotees, Krishna personally comes. And when it comes to maintaining the rest of the universe, Krishna deputes it to his energies. You take care, I am not personally involved. But when it comes to carrying Nanda Maharaj's slippers, Krishna will personally lift it, put it on his head and carry it to Nanda Maharaj. So therefore, this is our Lord. And we should have that trust. And if we are unable to tolerate the pain, let us fall at Krishna's feet and say, Krishna, please remove this suffering. That is fine. Rather than telling, oh, Krishna is not taking care of me. Actually, it is my karma only. I will rather go to an astrologer and try to fix my problem. Like that. So this is the second question. The brief answer, we don't have sufficient time. It's already 55 minutes have passed just answering 2 questions. So we have another 23, 24 more questions. So we'll start. Third question. As you mentioned that this is a summary study and it is wonderful, but is there some video courses where these concepts are discussed in a bit more detail? Actually, I clarified this. This question was based on the first 1 or 2 classes. I did start this course as a summary study, but the way the course progressed, it was by no definition you can call it as a summary study. We actually discuss things in detail. So therefore, I hope the devotee who asked this question continued the course till the end. So this was not a summary study. Maybe the first 1 or 2 small sections we did cover it quickly, but rest of the book we covered it quite elaborately. Fourth question. Bhava is already present in the heart of all the jivas. True. Does it mean that unless the jiva develops faith in bhakti, his bhava can never manifest? Yes. It will just be like a locked room. The treasure is there inside the locked room, but unless we have the key to open that lock, we can never access that treasure. So therefore, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi, Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaya Uday. So if Shravanadi Shuddha Chitta, that is sadhana bhakti, when our heart is not cleansed by practice of sadhana bhakti, bhava cannot manifest. Unless very rare cases due to Kripa Siddhi, Kripa Siddhas where special mercy is given by Krishna without even making them to perform any sadhana. So some people, Krishna may take them directly to the level of bhava or prema. Those are extremely rare cases. What about the jiva satisfied with awe and reverence worship? No problem. What happens to their bhava? Their bhava also is filled with lot of awe and reverence. So this is what practitioners of other sampradaya who feel very comfortable worshipping the Supreme Lord in awe and reverence, in his Vaikuntha mode, they also progress through Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava and Prema. But that Bhava and Prema is also filled with lot of awe and reverence. So no problem. That is also possible. Fifth question. As it is said that one should have goal to please Krishna despite having many anarthas in order to execute pure devotional service. Yes, one may have many anarthas, but still one's desire should be to practice pure devotional service. But if I take pleasure in reputation and fame while doing frontline services, then what would be my destination? I hope the devotee is talking about himself and not someone else. So if this question is about oneself, I am taking pleasure in reputation and fame while doing frontline services, which means already we are identifying that it is an obstacle. That is why we are asking this question. We already feel that something is wrong here. So therefore, yes, it is true that at some stage of our devotional development, this puja labh pratishta, the desire for reputation, fame, name, glorification, it becomes an obstacle. But therefore we have to constantly be hearing about the pitfalls of falling for this name, fame, glorification. Is it pure devotional service because here my intention is not pure to satisfy Krishna but my ego? So one who is really convinced of this will not ask such a question. So such a person would justify, oh, what is wrong? I am worshipping Krishna only. What is the problem? The fact that someone is asking such a question means that he is struggling with it and he is identifying his struggle. But if this question is addressed to someone else, oh, he is trying to take pleasure in reputation and fame. How do we know? Maybe he is just suffering, he is just addicted to it and he is not able to come out of it. Just like sometimes due to greed, an ant may come near a cup of honey. I am remembering this example because just today morning I was doing worship of Shalagram, Shila in our temple, and I was making the Panchamrit and for bathing the Lord. So in that cup of honey, suddenly one ant came out of greed. He wanted to enjoy, but then he got stuck up within the honey and he was just drowning in that honey. So similarly, and then I had to take it out. Similarly, devotees also may get tempted by that fame, glorification, etc. But they may get stuck up and then they may sincerely be praying inside, Krishna, please get it out. I'm just stuck up in this name, fame, glorification and I'm feeling hollow from inside. But at the same time, the addiction is so strong that they are not able to come out of it. So as long as the person identifies that this is not the highest platform of practicing devotional service, I should give it up, then gradually over a period of time, Krishna takes care of that also. Sixth question, can you please explain again about why Draupadi asking for help from Krishna is not accepted? I think the question is, probably there is a typo here. I think the question must be why Draupadi asking for help from Krishna is accepted, because that's what we discussed in the Anyabilashita Shunyam. So, because under normal circumstances, Draupadi always acted in a way to please Krishna only. Only under life-threatening situations, she prayed for self-protection. So, therefore, such a plea for self-protection does not disqualify anyone from being categorized under the realm of pure devotional service. I understand that this is why it is Anyabilashita Shunyam, correct. In that last ita allows us to ask for self-protection, correct. But then is it only self-protection? Okay, then what else? Are we allowed to ask for the protection of our family member? Yes, why not? If we don't ask for Krishna, whether we ask or not, when our family member falls sick or when he is in trouble, we naturally want him to feel better. So whether we directly ask Krishna or not, that desire is there. So we might as well ask Krishna, Krishna, please help. He is suffering. Because of his suffering, he is not able to think about you. So please remove his suffering. It is natural for a Vaishnava to be paradukka dukhi. When someone is suffering, it is natural to feel bad. So one should feel bad, and one can as well pray to Krishna for that. That's not inappropriate. But in praying, also when we progress, we will progress. Our prayers will also evolve. Initially, we may pray, Krishna, please let him overcome that, take this suffering away from him. And then when we progress more in Krishna consciousness, we may pray, Krishna, please give him the strength to grow in Krishna consciousness through this suffering. We may pray like that. And then when we progress even more, we may pray, Krishna, please give me the ability to see how this person's suffering is helping him grow in his Krishna consciousness. Like that. Can you give more examples to clear which abhilasha we can have and is allowed in bhakti? Anukulyasa sankalpo. We can pray for anything that is anukul for our bhakti. And if you want to know which are the things which are anukul for our bhakti, I would strongly recommend you can go over this bhajan by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu Bhajana Anukula. So he says what are the things which are anukul for bhakti. So we can pray for all of that. And anything that is pratikul for our bhakti, we should not pray for it. Seventh question. You have said that one has to have the goal as pleasing Krishna in order for our bhakti to be Uttama Bhakti. Yes. In the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he did not have that as his goal. Yes, he did not have that as his goal. So what category does Dhruva Maharaj's bhakti fall into? When he was a practitioner, his bhakti fell in the category of Karma Mishra Bhakti, mixed devotional service. He did worship Krishna, but by that worship he wanted to achieve material benediction. So it falls within the category of Karma Mishra Bhakti. Also, please explain the shloka Akama Sarvakamova. So Akama Sarvakamova Mokshakama Udaradihi Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. That verse says, whether you have no material desire or all material desires or desire for liberation, worship Krishna to fulfill it. Because ultimately it is Krishna only who is providing it. Why don't you pray to Krishna for that? So this verse says, an intelligent person, even though he may have these desires, will try to fulfill it by worshipping Krishna. That's what this verse says. How does one get purified even if one is not performing Uttama Bhakti? The only means of getting purified if one is performing mixed devotional service or demigod worship or anything for that matter is only through the association of devotees. Bhagavatam says, Etavan eva yajatam iha nishreya sodayah bhagavati achalo bhavo yad bhagavata sangatah. All these demigod worshippers and other people or even mixed devotees for that matter, the highest benediction of worshipping Krishna with a pure heart is possible Bhagavata Sangatah, only if they get the association of pure devotees. Otherwise it is not possible. Is it that Krishna forcefully gives bhakti to them even though they are not desiring it, as in the case of Dhruva Maharaj? Yes, in the case of Dhruva Maharaj is a very special case, as we discussed. There are some cases of Kripa Siddhi where Krishna may forcefully give that also, but they are very, very rare cases. The general situation is that devotees have to practice sadhana and gradually progress, and then only when they practice pure devotional sadhana they will get prema. Otherwise, whatever they are praying for, Krishna will give it. But Dhruva Maharaj's case is a very rare case. Sometimes Krishna, to show his independent nature, I am not bound by rules, I create the rules. In order to establish that point, sometimes he may give some Kripa Siddhi to some living entities. But they are very rare cases. Dhruva Maharaj had Narada Muni as his guru, and we also have our spiritual masters. So does this situation and rule apply for all of us? See, Dhruva Maharaj was a special case. He was clearly praying. He was convinced that the goal of life is to get a kingdom greater than my father, grandfather and great-grandfather. But in our case, it may not be the case. We are probably not convinced that the highest goal of life is to actually get a kingdom greater than my father. We know it is I may have that desire, but it is an obstacle. We see that. So our case and Dhruva Maharaj's case is not the same. Dhruva Maharaj was a very determined and highly elevated mixed devotee, but we are very weak-hearted practitioners of pure devotional service. So therefore, there is a difference between the two. Eighth question. Can you please elaborate the difference between Bhakti and Uttama Bhakti? Bhakti has two elements, Uttama Bhakti has four elements. I will explain it based on the definition of pure devotional service as given by Srila Rupa Goswami. The two elements that Bhakti has are Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. Anukulyena means a favorable attitude towards the Supreme Lord, and Krishna Anushilanam means showing that favorable attitude manifests in the form of serving the Supreme Lord, using one's mind, body and words. That is Krishna Anushilanam. So Bhakti has these two elements. If Bhakti has two additional elements, then it is called as Uttama Bhakti. The two additional elements are Anyabhilashita Shunyam and Jnana Karmadhyanavritam. If that person who is worshipping Krishna is worshipping Krishna purely for the pleasure of Krishna and not for any personal benefit, then it is Anyabhilashita Shunyam. What is Jnana Karmadhyanavritam? If that person is trying to please Krishna only through Navada Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. He is not trying to please Krishna through karma, jnana, yoga, etc. Or he is not trying to mix bhakti with karma, jnana, yoga, etc. That is called as Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. So if this bhakti, which has Anukulyana and Krishnanushilanam as two elements, additionally has the elements of Anyabhilashita Shunyam and Jnana Karmadhyanavritam, then it is called as Uttama Bhakti. Ninth question. I have a doubt on the Samagri Bhava. You explained about Vibhav and within that you explained Ashraya Alambana and Vishaya Alambana. Somehow I couldn't grasp enough details about Uddipan. Can you kindly elaborate more on Uddipan, please? So as we discussed, this comes in the Vibhav. Vibhav means that which inspires rasa. As we discussed, this has two elements, the Alambana and Uddipana. Alambana means the shelter. What gives shelter? You have to have the object of love and the abode of love. Just like you have to have the mother and the child. Mother is the abode of love for the child and the child is the object of love of the mother. So this is Vishaya Alambana and Ashraya Alambana. Vishaya Alambana is the child, Ashraya Alambana is the mother. Apart from that, Uddipan. Uddipan means certain objects or qualities connected to the Vishaya which may inspire that love. Like for example, photograph. The child might have grown up and he had gone to another place to work or study. The mother or father may look at the photograph of that child and that looking at that photograph can also inspire favorable emotions. So those objects are called as Uddipanas. Like in the case of Krishna, his peacock feather, someone sees a peacock and remembering Krishna's, one may remember Krishna seeing a peacock. Krishna's lotus footprints, they also act as Uddipan. When the Vrajavasis used to walk in Vrindavan, everywhere when they see Krishna's lotus footprints, it inspires that favorable emotion in their heart. Like that, when Mother Yashoda sees hears the ankle bell sound of Krishna, that acts as an Uddipan. So Uddipanas are those objects or things which can inspire that remembrance of Krishna. 10th question. Will you be sharing the PPT that you presented in the class? Yes, very soon, within a day or two, we will upload this whole PPT in online.ecovillage.org.in. So kindly you visit this website. You can create your own login free of cost and then access these courses. And when you go to the courses, you can there will be course material there. You can download that PPT and utilize it. 11th question. Is it advisable to have emotions while doing japa? Yeah, that's why we read many verses glorifying the holy name. So when we hear a lot about, that's why we chant the Shikshashtakam prayers in order to create favorable emotions. And in some temples, just before japa there is a brief japa talk. And some devotees glorify the holy name, present the glories of the holy name, so that we develop the right kind of emotion to approach the holy name. But here is a very more specific question. For example, getting in the mood of Hanuman while chanting. I mean, I don't know what the devotee means here. What does it mean to getting into the mood of Hanuman while chanting? It's not very clear, but these kind of emotions like, an emotion of a very favorable approach towards the holy name after hearing the glories of the holy name, that is allowed. But to think that, I don't know what exactly the question means. Does he imagine that he is Hanumanji and he chants, or what? I don't know. Okay, 12th question. Can you suggest a class that expertly explains the 5 rasas with examples and also a process to ascertain our strongest rasa for the Lord? So this subject matter is little elevated. This comes in the later sections of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But as of now, it is very difficult to ascertain our rasa because it has not developed yet. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaya Uday. At this stage, we have to concentrate on the best way to ascertain the strongest rasa, our strongest rasa is to Kintu Adarad Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta. To regularly, with great sincerity, by avoiding the offenses, practice the morning program and all the services that is allotted to us, and deal with the devotees in a very kind way, nice way, develop friendships with devotees, engage in devotional activities with the devotees. When we do this slowly, when the heart becomes purified, then automatically our rasa towards the Supreme Lord will be revealed, but in the later stages. 13th question. If we get the opportunity to serve the Lord in various rasas, in Salokya, Sarupya, Sarshti and Samipya, they are not called rasas, they are actually muktis, then why do pure devotees don't desire that type of liberation also? It's not that they don't desire that. It's not that they desire or not desire. They actually desire service. Wherever service is available, they take it. That is why the verse says, Salokya Sarshti Samipya Sarupya Ekatvam Apyuta Diyamanam Na Grinanti Vina Mat Sevanam Jana. Without service, if these things are offered, the devotee is not interested, because he is interested only in serving, and when that service is available in Vaikuntha through Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya, etc., he will accept. He has nothing against these kinds of liberation. He is concerned only about serving. When service is available anywhere, he will accept it. 14th question. In the pure devotional service definition, in reference to the word Adi, I saw in your slide and heard you mention about Sankhya obstructing pure bhakti. Since you taught Lord Kapila's section and Sankhya, how to understand that Sankhya is obstructing pure bhakti? So yes, this is one of the sections which I have taught quite a few times, Kapila Dev's Sankhya, and in Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, and also in Lord Kapila does give the definition of pure devotional service in 3rd Canto 29th chapter 11th and 12th verse. Can you please elaborate on this? One of the biggest sections of Bhagavatam also is Kapila Dev's Sankhya. It spans over 9 chapters. And also Uddhava also speaks elaborately on the themes of Sankhya. But in Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Adi refers to Sankhya also, Sankhya Yoga, etc. So how to understand? Of course, that Sankhya refers to the atheistic Sankhya as propounded by the atheistic Kapila. But Kapila Dev's Sankhya is actually bhakti only. So we don't have to call Kapila Dev's Sankhya as Sankhya, it is actually bhakti only. So in that sense, by studying Kapila Dev's Sankhya, we are actually performing devotional service. That Sankhya does not fall within the category of Adi. The atheistic Kapila talks only about the 24 elements, but Kapila Dev talks about 28 elements. He talks about only the 24 material elements. Apart from talking about the 24 material elements, Kapila Dev of Bhagavatam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he speaks about the Jivatma, he speaks about the Supreme Lord, he speaks about Kala, and he speaks about Prakriti. But these 4 are not mentioned by atheistic Kapila. He speaks only about the 24 products of Prakriti. So that kind of an understanding of rejecting the soul, rejecting the Supreme Personality of Godhead is an atheistic philosophy. So if one's understanding is covered by such atheistic philosophies, it becomes Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, like that. 15th question, we might be praying for practicing bhakti nicely, but might be there is a bit more desire for personal well-being also. Is it pure devotional service? Yeah, I mean personal well-being, whether we pray for it or we may perform yoga or whatever, ultimately we understand that if our body is not functioning properly, then we are not at such an elevated stage where we can completely neglect our sick body and perform bhakti with the same kind of intensity. Because our intensity of practicing bhakti is compromised due to sickness, it is okay to pray for a healthy body so that we can practice devotional service nicely. Not that I want a healthy body so that I can enjoy nicely. That is not pure devotional service. 16th question. Also in difficult times we might pray for the well-being of our parents or others who are not in good health. Will it come under pure devotional service? Yes, why not? Because if our parents are not keeping good health, then we also get upset, and our parents may also be devotees. So it is natural, as we discussed this already, it is natural for a devotee to be paradukka dukhi. How? So it can extend to one's family members also. Similar questions. 17th question, we might also pray for understanding the Shastras, especially when we are weak in Shastric subject matters. Should it be considered pure devotional service? Why not? Shastras are non-different from Krishna. For us, Shastra means Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam means non-different from Krishna. To try to understand Bhagavatam is not Jnana Prayas. It is pure devotional service only. That is why one of the 5 most potent limbs is actually Bhagavata Artha Aswadaha. To relish the deep meanings of Bhagavatam. To relish the deep meanings of Bhagavatam, first we have to understand. Only then we can relish. Nothing wrong. From where can we revise all this subject matter? Will you send some modules to study? Same question, again, same answer. online.ecovillage.org.in. You can kindly go register yourself free of cost and you can access the course material there. 19th question. When we are practicing at our level, oftentimes we do pray for our health if we are suffering for long. It's not life-threatening situation, but will it be considered pure devotional service? We already answered. 20th question. If we desire for bhakti of all family members, is it desiring too much with regards to Anyabhilashita Shunyam? Absolutely not. As preachers, we do pray for the other people whom we may not know. We may pray for them to take up to devotional service. Why should we not pray for our own family members? If our family members take up to bhakti, then it is so convenient for us to practice also bhakti at our home. So it is definitely falls within the category of Anyabhilashita Shunyam. 21st question. I have one question regarding Cheshta and Bhava Rupa Anushilanam. Is it possible to experience Bhava sometimes and then Cheshta most of the times? Or it comes in sequence only and stays? While we are at the sadhana bhakti level, we cannot experience Bhava or spiritual emotions. Mostly they are material emotions only. But when we reach the stage of Bhava Bhakti or Prema Bhakti, then also we do perform Cheshta. Like we saw the example of Mother Yashoda churning butter for Krishna. So that is Cheshta. She is cooking for Krishna, that is Cheshta. And Radharani and the other gopis are doing various services for Krishna, that is Cheshta. Cheshta is there, but along with Cheshta, Bhava is also there. But for a sadhaka, he has not reached the stage of Bhava, therefore only Cheshta is there. 22nd question. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3 as follows. So Prabhupada's purport, quote, there is no possibility for rasa between a man and animal or between a man and any other species of living beings within this material world. The rasas are exchanged between the members of the same species. My question is, we see so much of loving exchanges between people and animals or birds in the form of pet animals. We also see reciprocation from animals, especially cows. How can we understand this? See, it is just a question of terminologies. Prabhupada is not telling that there cannot be relationship between the same different species. There can be relationship, but technically it is not called as rasa. A wonderful relationship may exist between cow and a human being, between Krishna and cows. Even in the spiritual world, it is not called as rasa, but it is called as uparasa. So relationships do exist, but just that it is the terminology rasa is generally used to indicate relationship between same species only, especially between humans and humans, like that. 23rd question. I have some desire to please Krishna and side by side lots of sinful activities which I am forced to do. Then how can I identify myself if I am on the right track or not? The fact that you are asking this question, you are certainly on the right track. We have to try our best to keep ourselves away from those kind of circumstances which may inspire our sinful desires, and continue practicing devotional service. Slowly the devotional service will cleanse the heart and the sinful desires will go away. But we should not think that it is all right to indulge in sinful activities. That is not right. Then it would be the seventh offense, namno baladhyasya papa buddhi, committing sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. We should not do that. That is a big problem. That is a big offense. But if we are troubled by our past conditioning, but if we are sincerely trying to serve Krishna, while carefully trying to avoid the circumstances which may push us to commit such sinful activities, then it is possible that by practice of bhakti, our heart will get cleansed one day and we can practice pure devotional service effortlessly. 24th question. Sometimes we find ourselves on both the category of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and mixed devotional service. So please explain if these exist together or something else. I need to personally talk with you to understand what you mean that sometimes you are in Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and sometimes mixed devotional service. Generally it is not possible. Either one is practicing mixed devotional service because it is a sense of conviction, it is not in activities, it is there in one's own faith, trust, what is one's understanding and conviction. That does not change. So therefore, maybe we should talk so that we can understand what you mean more clearly. 25th question. You said that when a devotee suffers, that situation is created by Krishna to accelerate his bhakti. So if the devotee is in Vaidhi sadhana stage, sufficiently troubled by anarthas, but trying to please Krishna, then also does Krishna personally intervene to give troubles? Yes. Right from the day the devotee decides to practice devotional service, Krishna takes over. Are these troubles not due to the devotee's past karma? No, they are personally given by Krishna. It may have something to do with what the devotee has done in his past life or before coming to Krishna consciousness. But Krishna only chooses to give that suffering and it is not due to his karma. 26th question. My spiritual, of course this has nothing to do with the subject matter, but still devotees should not feel that I skipped some question, therefore I am taking this question. But I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with the subject matter that we have discussed in this course. My spiritual guide gave me lectures to hear. In one lecture, I heard that we should not jump to various sources. hear from him, hear from him, hear from him, like that. So the question is, so I found it little confusing that should I hear these lectures or not. I mean, on one side you are telling that that person is your spiritual guide, and if he has indicated that don't hear from too many sources, but still, I mean, then I don't think why you should find it confusing. If you have accepted him as your spiritual guide and he recommends that don't hear from too many sources, then try to follow one guide. Hearing on social media is not recommended to me. I would also not generally recommend that people hear from social media. But as I have attachment to YouTube, etc., that's why is it okay to hear. So if you have attachment to YouTube, then you ask your spiritual guide what you should do. Because otherwise it would unnecessarily so you choose, you decide your spiritual guide and try to follow. That would be a very congenial, convenient way for progressing in devotional service. So you can ask your spiritual guide if it is all right to hear these lectures. If he feels no, then don't hear. So thank you very much. That was the last question. So it was, I'm feeling extremely grateful that I got this opportunity to interact with you. Of course, not interact, but share something which was there in this book. So for future courses, if you liked this course, then please visit online.ecovillage.org.in, in which future courses will be advertised, and you can access these courses through that portal also. And if you feel that you could not ask the questions or the answers to these questions were not satisfactorily answered, then you can write to this email address bs.ecovillage@gmail.com. So I may not very promptly answer, but definitely, in a few days I will definitely answer the questions. So please do write if your questions were not satisfactorily answered. So thank you very much. It was a very pleasant experience having your association. Hoping to have your association in the future courses also. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai. Shri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.